Yesterday morning, Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares was interviewed on CNBC, and he confirmed that affordability is the biggest issue facing electric vehicle sales. He announced that they will get to 500-mile batteries this year and 8 new battery electric vehicles this year also to the US. Shockingly, he says 10 years down the road, there's going to be 5 major car companies globally. Stellantis will be one of them. So what's the way that they're going to make cars more affordable? It's via design to cost for electric vehicles. So what does this mean? What are their chances of succeeding? Jeff Lutz is here with us today, and he actually teaches design to cost to companies today. There are some very interesting opinions that he has. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining us. This is right up your wheelhouse, so you can teach us and tell us more about what this thing called design to cost. Thank you for joining us.
Sure. The full course costs a lot of money, but we'll do the abbreviated version here. I really wanted to just comment on this video and his take. First off, I'm glad to hear that, they're pretty confident in their approach. We'll play the video and hear about it, but they're basically asking Carlos Tavares, who's the CEO of Stellantis, well, everybody's taking their shot at EVs. What makes you so confident that you're going to do it, and be profitable? And he says design to cost. And what he means by that is kind of a purpose-built program from the ground up to design the product and do budget-based economics for every major subsection of the vehicle, and to really budget everything along the way versus kind of like putting the product together from a feature perspective and then asking how much it costs. So it's kind of a different approach. It's kind of a really 1 or 2 sentence way to describe it. But why don't we let him speak a bit about it, and then we'll pause it at a few key points.
Okay. Well, let me know when to pause it. I'll go ahead and play the CNBC video.
Is it going to be internal combustion engine? Is it going to be a hybrid? Is it going to be an EV? You know about the debate that's going on right now. EV market is slowing down in terms of the adoption rate here in the United States. Does that continue at least through the rest of this year and several years? What do you see?
What I see is that to make the EV spark, you need to align a certain number of stars. You need, of course, clean energy. You need a very dense charging network that people can see so that they remove range anxiety. They need a great product with a very high range, right? Like the products we are bringing to the market, 500 miles of range. That should be enough. And you need affordability. And what is at stake right now is affordability. That's the major star that is right now not totally aligned with the 3 other ones, assuming that they would be, which is not
that the supply chain? Is that the main issue?
It's
raw materials?
It's design to cost, is the fact that we need to be using raw materials for the battery cells, which are not scarce, because as long as they are scarce, there is a lot of potential inflation and volatility. Design to cost, raw materials which are not scarce, and we have to double the power density of the battery cells so that you can have a smaller battery with less weight and therefore less cost.
He's shaking his head over there.
No, it's a lot. You got a lot to do. You got a lot to do. You got to make it much more,
So he went through a number of different things. He kind of mishmashed what actually is design to cost, which is really focused on all the different subsystems, in this case of a vehicle, and figuring out kind of the budget-based unit economics well in advance. Unit economics are basically the entire stack of cost going from the base layer of raw material to the final component state that goes in the bill of material. Think about it, it's kind of the 10,000 parts that are inside of the vehicle that you actually drive off with. And then there's all the other items that are called non-bill of material that are related to the construction of the product. Call it the general assembly process in the factory. Call it the capital expenditures to build the product. And the labor costs and so forth. And there's other lines involved, warranty and so forth. But basically, when he says design to cost, he's really focused on taking that whole budget outline from a unit economics perspective that says, look, if I'm going to sell a vehicle at a $35,000 price point and I want to make X percent of margin, I'm going to put a budget on that. I'm going to really focus the design of the vehicle to fit inside of that budget. That sounds very easy. It sounds like, well, why isn't everybody doing that? Well, there's been issues with EV, like he mentioned. There's been issues with raw materials, the volatility and scarcity of those raw materials, and selecting them. You have to select them many years in advance and make some of these bets many years in advance. It's a long-term contracts and so forth. But what he's basically saying is they're going to force fit product into various slots from a pricing perspective, and they're going to make it work. Where I think that they're going to struggle, or where there's a potential huge problem, is the total auto market is shrinking in size. We did a video on this yesterday, and when that is occurring, and you'll maybe hear him later in this clip talk about, he's talking about 8 different models coming out this year. When you're putting that many models out in succession, one of the things you're going to struggle with is the complexity in the factory of carrying all that inventory and having all those different lines configured to build that product. When you're switching over, between 8 different products, that switchover time is lost time for you as a manufacturer. The consumer doesn't get any of that. It eventually just hits your cost, your bottom line of your cost. So thinking of that switchover back and forth, the same thing that they're putting on their supply base as well is a switch back and forth between all those different components to make the 8 different vehicles that they want to release this year alone. And they've talked about numbers of upwards of 30 models globally that they want to do via EV. And I just, in a growing segment, the EV as a segment is growing, but in terms of the total auto industry, they're using their auto supply base that is really saddled with a tremendous amount of capacity. And the last thing they want to be doing is flip-flopping back and forth between multiple models. So this would be the time to actually shrink your model base and to really focus on making vehicles that can kind of transcend maybe multiple price tiers and and really reduce that complexity in your factory. So I think that's where they're making the fundamental mistake. But what they are employing is this design to cost methodology, though, is to get very close and do purpose-built design to fit the economics for where that vehicle will be maybe a year from now and where the industry will be a year from now. And I think that's one of a couple of areas where GM and Ford may have tripped up. But we can play a little bit more of the video to hear what else they have to say.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Just shocking what he says next, which is what you just said. They're going to make 8 new cars in the U.S., battery electric vehicles. They still have work to do with supercharger network and so forth. So and 500-mile battery. He's making a lot of boasts here. Let's listen more.
You mentioned a couple of kinds of anxiety there. I don't need that layered onto my existing anxiety. You got to understand why consumers feel this way.
Sure.
You have to.
Sure.
So you're going to get to 500 miles. When is that going to happen?
It's going to happen this year.
Okay. And then the density of not having to worry about being able to find a charge. When is it? At this point, I'd still have anxiety. I'm getting anxious talking to you.
Don't do that. That's not good for you, and it doesn't.
It's not good for anybody.
No, it doesn't help. I think that the car makers are now bringing a range that should remove that anxiety, in addition to the fact that you need, with your eyes, to see where the charging units are. The charging units need to come to your customer journey, to your daily journey, without you having to look for them. So when you go to gym, when you go to the supermarket, when you go to the mall, when you go to the restaurants.
We're a long ways from that happening.
You need to
here in the
see
United
that.
States.
So that's an infrastructure that needs to be set up.
And we really still are. I'm either going to buy an ICE car or a Tesla. That's still where we are right now. I don't want to buy an electric Jeep.
Yeah, I know this year, Stellantis is going to bring to the U.S. market only 8 new pure BEVs this year. And Stellantis in the world will have, by the end of this year, 48 BEV models, which is half of the total model portfolio of the company.
Let me ask you something, and I know.
Yeah, so for a couple of things. There's a whole thread on charging, which is interesting. At the end, Joe Kern got to the bottom line, which is if you're not buying a Tesla, you're going to have that charging anxiety. Now, Tesla is working with other auto manufacturers to open their charging network. It's not all of their charging network, but it's a lot of their charging network that would be made available for other auto manufacturers to use. But it's throughout the year. It's not all at once. And some have just recently signed on, which I believe Stellantis is one of the more recent to have signed on. But then he's talking about the charging network coming to you as well, which is what Tesla's really focused on. When you get in your vehicle and you pop in your journey, it tells you if you need to stop for a supercharger where. So they really bring the charger to you. But back to the complexity piece, the 8 models in the U.S. and the 48 globally, which is going to, so Stellantis is definitely going the battery electric route. And I think that's one of the, I think people talk enough about Stellantis. It's all these different brands that are put together, but they're definitely they're not going hydrogen. They're not just sticking with ICE. They're converting half of their fleet or their portfolio over to battery electric. I just think the complexity piece is going to crush them from a cost perspective and their supply base. Now, they are doing well currently shipping ICE vehicles and some hybrids, but ICE vehicles, they do have decent gross margins. But I think this complexity piece is going to continue to be a problem. If I were advising them, I'd be telling them to take that model count down and figure out how to do more late stage postponement of your vehicle so you can make changes very late in the process to give customers different options and features versus burdening your early part of your manufacturing process and your supply base. So 48 models, I mean, just think about the changeover. Think about the other thing to think about in the whole supply chain piece is demand planning and supply planning. So when you're demand planning, you're thinking like, what do I think my customers are going to buy? And then you've got to plan all your stock in channel. You got to plan it all the way back through your factory. And then you've got to you got to do supply planning with your supply base, and you've got to tell them what you want them to build at the right time. And to try to catch all those right points at 48 different models versus Tesla is essentially a 5-model company. I mean, this is where you start drawing the big differences in terms of capital efficiency and the manufacturing side, which is where they're spending a ton of their capex. And then on the R&D efficiency, think of the R&D efficiency. What percent of sales are they getting for each of these 48 models? What's the R&D efficiency to actually release these different design and release these models into the factory? And then you'll find that these things will be crushing over time. Now they may be one of he talks about 5 automakers surviving. They may be one of the 5 that survives, but he's also kind of portending like, look, this is going to get pretty messy over the next couple of years, which is where a lot of this discussion has been.
Wow, Jeff. I mean, yeah, you've been there. You know what's happening in these factories and planning out products, and you're already warning them about design to cost and all the things you just mentioned now. So, yeah, I don't know if he's just talking big or they need to hire you for you to actually quantify the actual issues that they will be facing. So, yeah, let's listen to his, again, more big talk here. Let's listen to what he thinks about where Stellantis will be in the future.
Told me outside. I said, look into the crystal ball and what do you see in terms of consolidation? And you gave me a number of major automakers that you think we're eventually headed towards. Tell these guys what you see, looking down the road. And I don't know if you outside, was that 10 years you're looking down the road?
Yes, I think that given this pressure on affordability, 10 years down the road, possibly in the planet, there will be around 5 big car makers in the world, around 5. Stellantis will be one of them. I can tell you, I'm very confident about what our people are doing. By the way, congratulations to them. But around 5, that's the number.
Make it more complicated. How many brands? Because one of the things that's so fascinating.
No, but if you take but look at this. If you look at major automakers, how many would you say we have legitimately major around the world right now? 15, 20?
Yeah, 15 to 20.
You could argue too, that's too many.
So he's saying it gets down to 5. You pick the 5 that are going to survive. He says it's going to be Stellantis. Does Toyota survive? What happens to Honda? Does Honda not survive? Somebody takes Honda over at some point? What happens between GM and Ford? What happens with Volkswagen? And BYD is in there.
Yeah, it's a mess.
I think it's an interesting prediction.
It's fascinating.
And there'll be 4 colors and all those. We already got that with the Teslas. They all look alike.
Yeah, I wish they would let him talk a little bit more.
They're kind of jumping all over him. I mean, we can talk about the 5. Tesla makes sense. Obviously, Toyota, maybe Stellantis. We'll see, and maybe 2 of the Chinese automakers. So he's a well-respected auto CEO. Stellantis is a huge company, so that's I would say a very bold statement for him to make as a CEO on a major network. To basically say, look, this industry is going to consolidate from 15 to 20 players down to 5. That's a big statement, and he's also known as a good CEO. And Stellantis again, mixed bag in terms of growth and so forth, but in terms of gross margins, they've done a pretty decent job. But again, this transition to EV, I think, is going to be tested. And if I were to summarize, going into this transition with exiting a high amount of complexity on the ICE side and then reintroducing a high amount of complexity on the BEV side, I don't think that's the right approach. I think they should use this opportunity to streamline their model count and really focus on products that'll both stand the test of time and that could maybe traverse one or two price tiers. But again, they've got a lot of smart people there too. I'm sure they'll figure it out. But just when I hear the model count and I hear the complexity involved and what that does to inventory and demand planning and so forth in an industry that's consolidating, to me that sets off sirens and red flags.
Yeah, especially since I don't think we've heard Stellantis specifically talk about like an unboxed model or a shared platform or, other things that you talked about, right? Automation of the factory. The reason why there's going to be consolidation of these brands is because there's only going to be Tesla, the Chinese, and a few others who can make that transition, you said, to EV, but also to have profitability to the consumers. We'll see if they can do it, but he's talking big. So thank you for evaluating that and breaking that down for us, exactly what's happening. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see.
It is exciting to see. We'll see what happens. It's because so much change is happening at the same time. Thank you, Jeff. This was fantastic. I appreciate you. Follow Jeff on X at the Jeff Lutz. Always great. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.